I think we can find ourselves in a place where we understand that we need to be better at managing and expressing our emotions. And many times that looks like, wanting to avoid emotions altogether. And if you've been following me for a while, you know that I speak to the value that emotions have and how we navigate things that happen in our lives, that they have their place, they have their role, there are their significance in, when our emotions come up, when anger comes up, frustration, irritation, sadness. All of those emotions have a place that supports how we move and navigate event situations in our life. But our goal and our effort is to make sure that it's not something that influences our space, our life, the people around us in a negative way. Today, I want to talk to you about 5 different things that I think are relevant and resourceful in how we manage emotions and how we navigate experience of them. The first thing I want to present or give as kind of a tip strategy has to do with having a workable definition of your emotions and the emotions of others. Now, what do I mean by a workable definition? Well, we all have that moment where we describe emotions and our reactions to events that happen. That's a defining point. When we can look at that emotion and give description, we're giving meaning and value to it. Now, if we're painting the picture of something in a very negative tone, then what happens next in that reaction comes from that definition, comes from that defining point. Well, when we create a workable definition, we're looking at it from a place of how do I use this as a resource? So, say we're coming into the house and things are not the way we wanted them to be, and we gave clear instructions. If I want that to be a workable definition, I'm going to look at it from a place of saying there's something about this that's not aligned with what I need it to be. And when I see it as that and see that emotion is giving me a perspective or an understanding of that, then I'm going to communicate both to myself and those around me from that place. Versus if I come to it from a place of nobody cares about what I want or what I think, that defining moment of my frustration or my irritation takes on a different tone. And how I express and how I acknowledge people in that moment comes from that tone. And so when we're looking at our emotional expressions, it's not just about the emotion, it's about how we're defining it. And so I want you to encourage you, take a step back and think about what way do I describe emotional events in my life? The second thing I would encourage us to consider is how we can separate the expression of an emotion from what triggered it. You know, I look at this a lot when it comes to kids' reactions. We'll look at it from an adult perspective and say, why is this kid reacting this way? It doesn't match the situation or what I said to them, but their emotions get so big, or their um, sadness or frustration or anger gets elevated really quickly. When we're talking about managing emotion, there's value and significance in separating the two. There's a part that we need to manage and adjust and account for the emotion. And then there's a part that we're going to look at that has to do with what triggered the emotion in and of itself. Those are two different things that we're actually trying to navigate. And if we stay focused on just that this emotion doesn't match what has happened, then we'll miss helping support the emotion that's being expressed, helping that person or ourselves work through the situation or the emotion that's happened right there. And so what does that look like? So that means if a spouse comes in and they're sharing their concern about an event or how somebody went about something or what they said to one another that the other didn't like, if we get caught up on the part about what was said, then we dismiss the emotion that happened. Your goal and focus when we're talking about high emotions or emotions that are expressed is to address the emotion and then the event. People want to know that their emotions and what they're feeling matters. And so when we can acknowledge that first and not try to make sense of it from our own perspective, then we get space to move through those events and situations differently. The third thing I want you to consider is understanding what you emotionally are needing and being able to create space for it. You know, this is a place where we create a little bit of awareness both to ourselves and to others that are intimately involved in our lives that we might have to deal with their emotions or cope with their emotions as well. Emotionally knowing what you have need of is that place and space to say, when I'm anxious, that's not when I want somebody to pursue me in additional conversation. I need a moment to gather myself and being okay with stepping away, not because I'm not trying to address the situation. That goes back to our tip 2. It's that I need to regulate my emotions before I can proceed forward in this conversation. I'm in a season of that with my son right now. There are different things right now that are creating this angst in him. Every time we try to pursue it from the adult perspective of, I need you to do what I ask, his angst goes up. When we can shift and address the angst and say, hey, you know what, take a moment, breathe, because mommy and daddy need to talk to you. Then I'm giving space for him to regulate his emotion to be available for what we need him to do. When we can create space, that there are some real emotions that come about with certain things that we might talk about, certain situations we might find ourselves in, then we can regulate and manage that emotion differently versus just kind of trying to push through it. This might come even with, speaking in front of people or having to have a hard conversation with somebody that can create some tension, some stress, some worries. Well, that place of addressing the emotion says, okay, I'm going to give myself a deep breather before I go into this conversation. I'm going to not go from a high intense set of events and tasks to jumping right in to having a conversation with this person, because I know I need to put myself in the calmest place. I need to readdress how I'm thinking about the conversation needs to be had. When we can step away and do that, we're creating space for regulating, managing the emotion, and then addressing the event that comes up, that's coming up, or that triggers that. I'm hoping this is kind of making sense. Is that we are focusing on that emotional awareness and how we manage it and how we can get to a place of not seeing emotions themselves as this problematic thing that we want to avoid, but that we are more empowered to say, I can move and navigate through my emotions in a way that's resourceful and productive in my everyday life. Fourth thing I want you to consider is how you provide space to personally learn about your emotions. And this is separate from the times where they are triggered. You know, when we can create experience that were just reflective, too often we will have something that triggers our emotion, and then we try to have a conversation either with the person or the people who have triggered that emotion, or we're in our feelings and we're thinking to ourselves about the feeling that we're having, and we're trying to understand it while we're still feeling. I'm not saying that that isn't, a part of creating an emotional awareness, but it also is influence because you're in the midst of it. You're not necessarily looking at it from an open point of view because you're feeling it as well. What I'm encouraging you to do is every once in a while having that quiet space where you're just thinking back on things that have influenced you to be worried or stressed, and saying, why is it that that creates worry and stress for me? What do I feel really um, consider or think about those things? And how do I maybe change the way I perceive them so that maybe my emotions don't come up in this way? Or are there things about it I need to change as I look at it and say, okay, well, it's because somebody has said it this way. And if I can communicate to them the, the significance of why that's not okay, or how that doesn't reach me, then I can shift being triggered in that emotion. Being able to take time and just reflect allows you to learn about you, your emotions, sometimes you and somebody else's emotions, so that when you have an opportunity to have conversation around them, either in a moment where an emotion might be triggered, and preferably when you're just in a place of connection and just able to talk through things without being triggered in the moment. That gives you space to both express what you need, to ask questions about what the other person's needs, so that when you're navigating emotions, you're in a place of insight, not reaction. The last thing I want to reflect on in this moment is how you fill each other's cup. Now, this concept of filling one another's cup is not new. It's those things that we do that help to show that we care. It's those things that we do to show up for one another. Well, in this moment, I want us to reflect, if the busyness of life and the days go by and you haven't had those intentional space, and an event that triggers a high emotion happens, one or both of you are working from an empty cup. And when we're in a place where we're working from empty cups, it's more challenging to show up and regulate and manage what's coming up emotionally. And so sometimes this is being able to fill your cup through your self care activities and routines. Sometimes this is those things that we do or say that allows us to slow down and express our value in somebody. It's to do things that help them to know that I got your best interest in heart, that I want the best for you, that I am somebody that you can count on. Because if an emotion triggers happen and I'm feeling like you don't care or value me, the things you filled up my cup with helps me to re-anchor that that isn't true, because you have done all of these things to fill my cup. I want you to think about this point of view of filling each other's cup from that place of awareness that if I can continually give you things to help you to know how I truly feel, how I truly think about you, how I am willing to show up for you, then when something happens that I'm in an emotional place that doesn't allow me to see how you said something or did something in that moment as significant, I have a place to reference to help me recenter, to help me to adjust because I'm not empty. I have resources in me that says that I'm okay, you're okay with me, and we can move through this. And so let's let's consider these when we're talking about how emotional moments show up in our lives and how we move or navigate them. If we could adjust in just these 5 ways, how would that shift the emotional landscape of how you show up in different situations, in different conversations, and your interactions with others?